now, right before the holiday season, to take these series of actions? Why didn't the president act sooner? And is that a reflection of the fact that his administration has failed to kind of anticipate and is much more reactive to these kinds of things rather than getting ahead of them as they should?
Well, that's not actually true. The president formed a task force at the very beginning of the administration, and what we know from the global supply chain issues is that they are multifaceted. Right now, we've been focusing on the ports and issues at the ports, and what leaders at these ports will tell you is that they've seen an increase in volume dramatically as it relates to last year, a year ago, 20%, 30% increase in volume. But there are other issues that have impacted the global supply chain that we've been working to address through our task force from the beginning. One of them is the fact that manufacturing sites around the world have been shut down because of COVID. We've been working to be the largest supplier of COVID vaccines to countries around the world for a range of reasons. It's morally right, but also to help address those global supply chain issues and the impact that manufacturing and the slowdown in manufacturing can have on the global supply chain. Another issue that people will tell you, and you've done some reporting on, many of you, is the shortage of drivers that we have seen, and there's been some reporting on it recently, but this has been an issue throughout the course of the year. The DMV has expedited their approval of commercial driver's licenses. In 2021, an average of 50,000 commercial driver's licenses and learning permits have been issued each month, 60% higher than 2021 numbers. We've also been working with unions to help address the shortages of workers, whether they are at ports or whether they are driving issues or other components that impact the supply chain. So I think the important thing to understand here is that there are multiple issues that are impacting the supply chain. And some of that is that as the economy has turned back on, more people had expendable income, wages, to buy more goods. More people are buying more goods. People have started to also buy more things online than going into stores. And so that is also impacting the volume, and there's a need for more. So we've been working on this since February, and we've seen the uptick, perhaps related to the fact that this season, sometimes people are buying even more goods, but we've been working on it since February.
Jen, I have a follow-up on that.
I'll come back to you, Emerald. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. As the president meets with lawmakers today, in his view, are there any non-negotiables in this package? Do any of his signature programs have to remain?
His red line continues to be that he will not raise taxes for anyone making less than $400,000 a year. And what we think about here is what we want to achieve, which is historic impact on how we address child care and care issues that families across the country are having, making sure we're doing something to address the climate crisis, and making sure we're more competitive and putting people back to work. There are a lot of ways to get there, but that's why the president proposed his packages. But really, the $400,000 taxes is his primary red line.
And you've talked a lot about urgency in passing the bill. Yesterday you said time is not unending. When does the clock run out for the White House?
I'm not going to set a new deadline today. I will just point you to the fact that today he is spending virtually nearly every minute of his day meeting with members of Congress, and I think that's a reflection of how urgent he feels moving things forward, coming to an agreed upon path forward, and moving towards delivering to the American people is.
And then just a question on North Korea. This morning, it tested a ballistic missile launched from a submarine. First, do you have a response to that? And then secondly, can you point to any actions that the administration is taking right now to achieve its ultimate goal of complete denuclearization?
Sure. Well, I know INDOPACOM and the State Department have spoken to this overnight, and I'd point you to them. As they've said, we condemn the DPRK's ballistic missile launch. These launches violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions and are a threat to the region. We call on the DPRK to refrain from further provocations and engage in sustained and substantive dialogue, and our commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea and Japan remains ironclad. These launches also underscore the urgent need for dialogue and diplomacy. Our offer remains to meet anywhere, anytime, without preconditions. We're also closely consulting with allies in this. In fact, this morning, Special Representative for the DPRK, Sung Kim, met with his Japanese and ROK counterparts to discuss how to engage the DPRK. And so we remain prepared to engage in diplomacy with the DPRK, and also, of course, to work closely with our allies and partners on addressing this as it proceeds.
Just to be clear, you said that on October 4th that they hadn't responded yet, so they still haven't.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Jen. Why is the administration flying thousands of migrants from the border to Florida and New York in the middle of the night?
Well, I'm not sure that it's in the middle of the night, but let me tell you what's happening here. It is our
4:29 a.m.
well,
Very early in the morning.
here we are
pre-dawn.
talking about early flights, earlier than you might like to take a flight. It is our legal responsibility to safely care for unaccompanied children until they can be swiftly unified with a parent or a vetted sponsor, and that's something we take seriously. We have a right obligation to do that and to deliver on that. As a part of the unification process, our Office of Refugee Resettlement facilitates travel for children in its custody to their families or sponsors across the country. So in recent weeks, unaccompanied children passed through the Westchester Airport, which I think is what you're referring to, en route to their final destination to be unified with their parents or vetted sponsor. It's no surprise that kids can be seen traveling through states, not just New York. It's something that we're also working to unite children with their family members or vetted sponsors in other parts of the country as well.
Okay, to follow up on some of the tax talk, there's this new proposal by Democrats in Congress and the Treasury Secretary to start monitoring every bank account that has $10,000 of cash flow per year. So is the plan to catch billionaire tax cheats by snooping on accounts that just have $10,000 in them?
Well, that's not exactly an accurate description. So let me help you with an accurate description of what is actually happening here. And there was a statement by the Secretary of Treasury on exactly this. Where she said in this statement, so just to reiterate, she deeply appreciates the work of Chairman Wyden and Chairman Neal's leadership on reconciliation, and in particular, the need to close the tax gap. At the core of the discrepancy in the ways types of income are reported to the IRS are opaque income sources, frequently avoid scrutiny, while wages and federal benefits are typically subject to full compliance. So people who get firefighters, employees at Fox News, anywhere where they may be getting a W-2, that's not what we're talking about here. They're already reporting their income. We're talking about high net worth individuals who are not paying the taxes they owe, and that's what this policy would propose to address.
But in the statement that you just cited, it says many top earners avoid paying billions in the taxes that they owe by exploiting the system. So why is it that you need to start looking at accounts that just have $10,000 in it? Maybe somebody doesn't get a W-2.
That is not exactly what it does. The $10,000 is anything under that would not be applicable, nor would people who receive W-2s, Peter. What we're talking about here are people who are high net worth individuals who are not paying the taxes they owe, something we think everybody believes should happen and can help pay for in a range of important investments to make us more competitive.
And then just one on vaccine requirements. If the whole point of a vaccine mandate is to make people safer, but a vaccine mandate also means tons of police and military may walk off the job, then at the end of the day, does a vaccine mandate make people safer?
Well, where are tons of police and military walking off the job?
Well, the Washington Post says that hundreds of thousands of U.S. service members remain unvaccinated, which is leading to questions about possible military readiness. The L.A. County Sheriff says that 5 to 10% of their workforce could walk off the job. And so, considering is there any concern about that?
Well, I would say what we point to, or what I would point you to, is evidence with a range of companies, organizations. Frankly, the Department of Defense can also give you the up-to-date statistics on members of the military. I believe it's over 90%, but I would point you them for statistics.
But there are other problems in the world than COVID-19. International terror, gang violence, murder, arson, drug dealing. Is there any concern about dealing with these things?
What was the number one cause of death among police officers last year? Do you know? COVID-19. So that's something that we're working to address, and police departments are working to address. If you look at Seattle as an example, which I know has been in some of the reporting, 92% of the police force is vaccinated, as are 93% of firefighters. 99% of Seattle's 11,000 employees have submitted vaccine verification or an exemption request.
Safety, though, all these other problems, terror, murder, robberies, kidnappings, is there any concern that if police forces shrink, or if the size of the ready military force shrinks, that the United States or localities may not be equipped properly to deal with
Peter,
them?
more than 700,000 people have died of COVID. Again, it was the #1 cause of death among police departments and police officers. It's something that we should take seriously. Departments are trying to save people in their departments, people who work for them. We support that effort, and there's been success across the country in that regard.
Thank you, Jen. Given that you have 2 separate meetings with moderates and progressives today, is this White House confident that it will reach a deal on reconciliation by Democratic leadership's self-imposed October 31st deadline?
That's not a deadline that we have proposed. The timeline for that is the surface transportation bill expiring, which is, of course, important, something we need to renew and save the jobs of thousands of employees who could be furloughed. But what our effort is and our focus is on is continuing to make progress. And we are getting closer to an agreement on a path forward to deliver for the American people. The president believes in the value of meeting face to face, hence the meetings today and his full day of meetings today. And we believe his view of the urgency here is reflected in the views of a lot of these members he's meeting with as well.
I hear you saying essentially that it's unlikely that you will reach, and I understand it's not your deadline, but still it's the deadline set by Democratic leadership. I hear you indicating it's unlikely you'll.
That's not what
have
I'm
an
not. That's actually not what I'm indicating. I'm indicating that we're continuing to make progress. We're getting close to the final stages here. We're working to get agreement on a path forward. We're making progress on that. I'm not going to set new deadlines. I understand why you guys want them. They're not particularly constructive otherwise.
Let me
So
ask you about what Senator Manchin said. He said, I don't know how that would happen. He went further than you are going. How can the president press for urgency in these talks when one of the top negotiators clearly doesn't think that this is imminent? A deal.
I think the president's view, which is shared by the vast majority of the Democratic caucus, is that he proposed these plans months ago. We've had months to discuss, consider, debate, litigate the nitty-gritty details. We're continuing to do that today, and it will come time soon to move forward and deliver for the American people. And that's something that the vast majority of the caucus agrees on.
Let me just ask you about the child tax credit, because there's been some discussion, a push by moderates for those tax credits to be limited to families making less than $60,000. Would the president agree to a final deal that only applied to those, that didn't apply to those making less than $60,000? And what would you say to families who say they just missed the cut and they need those benefits?
Well, there's a lot of proposals that are out there. I'm not going to speak to every single one of them. We're going to look at a final package. The president proposed an extension of the child tax credit. He has also supported, at times, as you know, income caps for a range of his proposals, including the child tax credit. But again, I'm not going to speak to individual proposals at this point in
I
time.
ask you about Haiti,
Yeah.
Jen, quickly. There are reports that the gang that kidnapped those 17 American and Canadian missionaries is asking for $17 million for their release, $1 million per person. What is the administration's response to that, particularly in light of the policy that the U.S. does not negotiate with those holding hostages?
Well, that remains our policy, and I can't get into too many details operationally here because has never been in the interest of bringing people home who are being held for ransom. What I can reiterate, Kristen, is that the FBI is a part of a coordinated U.S. government effort to get the U.S. citizens involved to safety. Also that the U.S. Embassy in Port-au-Prince is coordinating with local authorities and providing assistance to the families to resolve the situation. I'd also note that we've had a travel advisory for Haiti, which is at a level 4, conveying do not travel due to kidnapping, crime, civil unrest, and of course COVID-19. But kidnapping is widespread and victims regularly include U.S. citizens. We know these groups target U.S. citizens who they assume have the resources and finances to pay ransoms, even if that is not the case. So that is also something that remains a concern to us, but I can't get into more operational details.
The
Go ahead.
president still believe that
put a-
Build Back Better will not add a dime to the national debt?
Correct, it won't.
Why should Americans believe that?
Because it won't. Go ahead.
What if taxes that he says he wants to, get more taxes in? What if it doesn't happen? What if the economy goes sour? Lots of things can happen. What are you're going to tell from up there, future generations, not even born yet, that they're not on the hook for this? Is that right?
That's right, and hopefully you'll report accurate information yourself. Go ahead.
Just to
We'll do that.
put a fine point on it, any particular reason why Senators Manchin and Sinema are not involved or included in the afternoon meeting with the bicameral moderates?
No, the president just felt that this was the right approach, to have these one-on-one meetings with them, work through nitty-gritty details, and then have broader meetings with these members later this afternoon. But I would note, and some of this has been reported, different members have been meeting with each other outside of the White House. They're allowed to do that as well, and we expect that will continue.
I want to follow up on a question that both Peter and Weija asked you yesterday about
Sure.
how this president views the Justice Department
Yeah.
as independent. There have been a number of instances where the president has said publicly that he's either instructed or asked or directed the Justice Department to do different things. Where do you draw the line when you say the Justice Department is making independent decisions?
Investigations, that's where they make independent decisions. There's policy making where there can be discussion, but investigations, which historically, prior to the last administration, the Department of Justice has always had independent purview of. That is what the president expects, what the Attorney General expects, and what we will continue to deliver on.
The president said on October 7th he instructed the Justice Department to make sure that we deal with the violence on aircraft. He issued an executive order on July 9th having to do with antitrust, encouraging, all but directing, the Attorney General to vigorously enforce it. He said on July 13th the Justice Department would double its enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. Are you describing these things as policy determinations?
Well, look, Steve, I think the important thing also to convey accurately to people who listen to you is when announcements were made by the Department of Justice, and sometimes the president comments on them after those announcements were made, which I think was a case in at least one of those examples you gave. And yes, there are criminal investigations or investigations that are under the independent purview of the Justice Department, something that will continue to be under the independent purview of the Justice Department under this administration. And that is different from what was done over the last 4 years.
Go ahead. Thank you. Jen, the White House vigorously defended Secretary Buttigieg's right to parental leave and Republican criticism last week. There are reports that paid family leave could either be removed or greatly curtailed in the reconciliation package. So is the White House committed to ensuring that 12 weeks of leave for all Americans will be in the final bill?
That's what the president proposed, but I'm not going to negotiate what's in the package.
Okay, and why is the president not named a nominee to be vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff when General Hyten, who currently occupies the role, is due to retire by law next month?
I don't have anything to preview for you in terms of personnel announcements. Obviously, he wants to find the right person to serve in such an